Every morning at 7:12, a silver Ford F-150 sat across from Briarwood Elementary. Inside was Brock Barnes, 38, a school bus driver most people in Des Moines believed had abandoned his wife and children. The same worn blue jacket, the same coffee mug, the same empty parking spot. What nobody knew was that Brock had never left by choice. Then one morning his 12-year-old son, Mason, looked directly at him through the school drop-off line and immediately turned away. Before we continue, tell me where you're watching from and what your local time is right now. And if you enjoy stories where truth takes longer than lies, but wins anyway, subscribe and join us for the rest of Brock Barnes's journey. The house was quiet when Brock Barnes pulled into the driveway. Not the normal kind of quiet. Not the kind that settled over a home at 3:30 in the morning while children slept and the dishwasher hummed in the kitchen. This silence felt different. Heavy. Wrong. Brock shut off his Ford F-150 and sat for a moment, rubbing his eyes. He had just finished a 10-hour overnight shift at Midwestern Transit Services on the south side of Des Moines. The digital clock on the dashboard read 3:37 a.m. The porch light was on. Olivia never left the porch light on. That was the first thing he noticed. The second thing was the garage door, half open. He stepped out of the truck. Cold Iowa air swept through the driveway. The neighborhood was asleep. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. Brock walked toward the garage. His work boots echoed against the concrete floor. Empty. The family SUV was gone. He frowned. Olivia occasionally took early morning trips to visit her sister in Ames, but she always texted first. Always. Brock entered through the mudroom. The kitchen light was on. A single sheet of paper sat on the counter. Nothing else. No coffee pot, no purse, no backpack waiting by the door. Just the paper. Brock picked it up. His eyes moved across the page. The note was short, cold, vague. "We can't keep living like this. The kids and I need space. Please don't make this harder than it already is. Olivia." That was it. No address, no explanation, no discussion, no mention of where Mason and Sophie were. Brock stared at the note for several seconds. Then he folded it carefully and slipped it into his jacket pocket. He didn't throw it away. He didn't crumple it. He simply kept it. Then he walked upstairs. The hallway felt empty. The first bedroom belonged to Sophie. Pink curtains, a bookshelf filled with horse stories, a stuffed rabbit sitting against the pillow. But half the closet was empty. The dresser drawers were open. Several favorite toys were gone. Brock stood in the doorway. His chest tightened. He crossed the hall. Mason's room, the same story. Baseball trophies remained on the shelf. A few books remained on the desk. But clothes were missing. His backpack was gone. His baseball glove was gone. The room looked less like a child's bedroom and more like a place someone had hurriedly packed. Brock sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress dipped beneath his weight. He looked at the framed photo on the nightstand. The four of them at Adventureland Park the previous summer. Mason smiling, Sophie holding cotton candy, Olivia laughing, Brock standing behind them. A normal family. At least that's what it looked like. He reached for his phone. Called Olivia, straight to voicemail. He called again. Voicemail. Again, voicemail. No answer, no text, no explanation, just silence. For the next hour, Brock called every number he had. Olivia, her sister, a family friend. Nothing. As dawn began to break over Des Moines, he sat alone at the kitchen table. The note lay in front of him. Most people would have reacted differently. Some would have driven across town, searching. Some would have flooded phones with angry messages. Some would have shown up screaming on someone's doorstep. Brock did none of those things, because Brock understood something many people didn't. Panic created mistakes. Mistakes created consequences, and consequences could last years, especially when children were involved. At 6:14 a.m., he opened his contacts and selected a number he had not used in nearly 3 years. Rebecca Turner, family attorney. The phone rang twice. Rebecca Turner? Rebecca, it's Brock Barnes. A pause. Then her voice softened. Brock, what's happened? He looked at the note. My wife took the kids. Another pause. Are they safe? I think so. Do you know where they are? No. Did she leave anything? One note. Rebecca was silent for a moment. When she spoke again, her tone became precise, professional. Listen carefully. Brock leaned forward. Don't send angry texts. I won't. Don't threaten anybody. I won't. Don't post online. I won't. Save everything. Brock looked down at the note. Everything. Everything. She paused. From this moment forward, every text, every email, every voicemail, every document matters. Brock nodded, even though she couldn't see him. Okay. I'll clear my morning schedule. Meet me at my office at 9. Thank you. The call ended. For the first time since entering the house, Brock felt a small sense of direction. Not relief, not hope, just direction. And sometimes that was enough. At 7:30, he walked outside to retrieve the newspaper. A neighbor stood across the street, collecting mail. Mrs. Parker, retired school secretary, friendly, talkative, the kind of person who knew everything happening on the block. She noticed Brock immediately. Oh. The word slipped out before she could stop it. Brock gave a small nod. Morning. She hesitated. Something uncomfortable moved across her face. Then she spoke. Brock, I heard Olivia left. He remained calm. Looks that way. Mrs. Parker shifted her weight, clearly debating whether she should continue. Finally, she did. People have been talking. Brock waited. About what? Her eyes dropped, then rose again. Olivia told everyone you finally walked away. The words landed harder than the empty house, harder than the missing backpacks, harder than the unanswered calls. Because for the first time Brock understood something important. Olivia hadn't simply left. She had started telling the story before he even knew there was a story to tell. And she had gotten a head start. A big one. Mrs. Parker looked embarrassed. I didn't believe it. Brock noticed she hadn't said that immediately. Only after speaking. Only after seeing his reaction. He nodded politely. Thanks. Then he turned toward the house. The note still rested in his pocket. The morning sun climbed higher above the rooftops. Inside the empty bedrooms waited. Outside the first rumors were already spreading. And Brock had the uncomfortable feeling that finding his children might turn out to be easier than reclaiming the truth. By the following Monday, Brock Barnes discovered something that hurt more than the empty house. The story had already spread. Fast. Too fast. It moved through Des Moines, the way rumors often did quietly at first, then everywhere at once. Parents whispered during soccer practice. Neighbors talked over backyard fences. People lowered their voices when Brock entered a room. The version they heard was simple. Simple stories were always easier to believe. A husband became distant. A father stopped caring. A man chose freedom over responsibility. Then he walked away. The details changed depending on who told it. But the ending remained the same. Brock had abandoned his family. And most people seemed comfortable accepting that explanation. 3 days after Olivia disappeared with the children, Brock stopped at Miller's Diner on East Euclid Avenue. The place had served breakfast to half the city for decades. The waitresses knew regular customers by name. Truck drivers gathered there before sunrise. Construction crews stopped in for coffee. Brock had eaten there every Tuesday morning for nearly 7 years. As he entered, conversations softened. Not completely, just enough. Enough to notice. He ordered coffee, took a seat by the window. Two men at a nearby booth glanced in his direction. One of them quickly looked away. The other didn't. Brock recognized him. Darren Lewis, a father whose son played baseball with Mason. Darren nodded awkwardly. Not friendly, not hostile, just uncomfortable. Brock understood. People became uncomfortable when we thought they knew the truth, especially when the truth involved children, especially when they believed someone had failed them. The waitress arrived with coffee. She set the mug down carefully, then hesitated. "How are you holding up Brock?" It was a kind question, a sincere one, but it confirmed what he already knew. Everyone had heard. "Doing what I can." She nodded, then left. Across the restaurant, someone quietly said his name. Another voice answered. The conversation stopped when Brock looked up. That happened a lot now. By Thursday, it happened everywhere. The grocery store, the gas station, church, even online. Friends stopped returning messages. Not all of them, just enough to notice. Rebecca Turner wasn't surprised. She sat across from Brock inside her law office downtown. A yellow legal pad rested on her desk. Several folders were already beginning to pile up. "She's controlling the narrative," Rebecca said. Brock nodded. "I figured. Most people don't understand how powerful that is." Rebecca folded her hands. The first version of a story usually becomes the accepted version. Even if it's wrong, especially if it's wrong. Brock looked toward the window. Traffic moved slowly below. "What do I do?" Rebecca answered immediately. "Nothing emotional." "What does that leave?" "Evidence." The word lingered in the room. Evidence, not arguments, not social media posts, not public confrontations. Evidence. Rebecca slid a notepad toward him. "Document everything." "I already started." "Good." She pointed at the page. "Dates, times, calls, messages, school, contacts, everything." Brock nodded. He had already begun. A notebook sat on his kitchen table. Every interaction went into it. Every unanswered call, every returned text, every attempt to reach his children. The notebook grew thicker each day. That Friday, Brock drove to Briarwood Elementary. The school stood in a quiet neighborhood lined with maple trees. Children crossed sidewalks carrying oversized backpacks. Parents waved from car windows. Life continued normally, at least for everyone else. Brock parked near the front office, walked inside. The scent of disinfectant and freshly sharpened pencils filled the hallway. A receptionist looked up. "Can I help you?" "Yes." Brock offered a polite smile. "My name is Brock Barnes." Recognition flashed across her face immediately. Not surprise. Recognition. That told him enough. "I'd like to speak with someone regarding my children." The receptionist hesitated, then picked up the phone. A few minutes later, Diane Keller emerged from an office. Vice principal, late 40s, professional, careful. Brock had met her several times during school events. She had always seemed friendly. Today was different. "Mr. Barnes." "Miss Keller." Her smile looked forced. "Can we talk privately?" She led him into a small conference room. The door closed. Silence settled between them. Then Diane folded her hands. "How can I help you?" "I'd like information regarding Mason and Sophie." Her expression changed, slightly, almost imperceptibly. But Brock noticed. "They're doing well." Relief touched him briefly, then disappeared. "Can I see them?" Diane shook her head. "I'm afraid that won't be possible." "Why?" Another pause, longer this time. "Mrs. Barnes has requested limited contact." Brock remained calm. "Requested?" Diane chose her next words carefully. "There are concerns." Concerns. The vague language irritated him. What concerns? I can't discuss that. Brock leaned back slightly. Not aggressive, not confrontational, just listening. Diane continued. For now, we believe this arrangement is in the children's best interest. We. The words stood out. Not Olivia, not a court, not a judge. We. Brock looked at her, then asked the question quietly. Has a court ordered that? Diane hesitated. Just for a second. But it was enough. No. The room became very still. Then why am I being denied access to my children? Diane didn't answer directly. Instead, she stood, a signal that the conversation was over. I think that's all we can discuss today. Brock rose slowly. He understood something important. Arguing wouldn't help. Not here, not now. So he simply nodded. Thank you for your time. Then he left. Outside recess had begun. Children filled the playground. Laughter drifted through the spring air. Brock stopped near the parking lot fence. Not close enough to violate school boundaries, not close enough to cause concern, just far enough away to watch. For several minutes he scanned the playground. Then he saw her. Sophie, 8 years old, blonde ponytail, pink jacket, the same one he bought last Christmas. She was standing beside a group of girls near the swings. For a moment, Brock forgot everything else. The rumors, the lawyers, the empty house. None of it mattered. His daughter was 20 yards away. Safe, healthy, smiling. The sight nearly broke him. He lifted a hand instinctively, not waving, just raising it slightly. A father's reflex, nothing more. Sophie's eyes drifted toward the parking lot, toward him. For one brief second, father and daughter looked directly at each other. Brock felt his heartbeat stop. Recognition appeared in her face. Then something else, confusion, fear. The smile vanished. Sophie immediately turned away. She grabbed another girl's hand and hurried toward the far side of the playground, without looking back. Brock slowly lowered his hand. The wind moved through the fence. Children continued laughing. A whistle blew somewhere near the soccer field. Life continued. But Brock stood motionless, because he had seen something far worse than rejection. He had seen hesitation, the hesitation of a child who no longer knew what to believe. As Brock walked back toward his truck, one thought followed him all the way home. Someone wasn't simply keeping his children away from him. Someone was teaching them to be afraid of him, and whoever was doing it had already been at work for a long time. The first morning Brock Barnes parked across from Briarwood Elementary. He told himself it would only be for a few minutes. Just enough to see that Mason and Sophie were safe. Just enough to reassure himself that they were healthy. Just enough to get through another day. That was 6 weeks ago. Now it had become a routine. Every weekday morning, every week, without fail. At exactly 7:12 a.m., Brock's silver Ford F-150 rolled into the same public parking space on Willow Street, directly across from the school's eastern entrance. He never parked in the faculty lot, never blocked traffic, never approached school property, never gave anyone a reason to complain. He simply sat and watched. The routine began long before sunrise. His alarm sounded at 5:30 every morning, not because he needed to be awake, because sleep rarely lasted much longer anyway. He would shower, make coffee, read through the previous day's notes, then drive across town through quiet residential streets. The same route, the same destination, the same hope. Some mornings brought disappointment. Others brought pain. But Brock kept showing up. Because showing up was the only thing nobody could take from him. The notebook on his passenger seat continued growing. Date, time, weather, observations. Everything was recorded. Rebecca Turner had insisted on it. At first it felt excessive. Then Brock started understanding why. Facts disappeared, memories changed, but written records remained. April 7th, 7:13 a.m. Observed Mason exiting white SUV. Appeared healthy. No contact. April 8th, 7:11 a.m. Observed Sophie wearing pink backpack. No visible injuries, no contact. April 9th, vehicle absent. Possibly absent from school. Each entry took only seconds. Yet together they were becoming something larger. A timeline, a history, evidence. One cold Thursday morning, rain fell steadily across Des Moines. The school drop-off lane became chaotic. Parents hurried children beneath umbrellas. Teachers directed traffic. Brock sat inside his truck, watching windshield wipers sweep across the glass. Then he saw Mason. The boy jumped from Olivia's SUV, carrying no umbrella. Rain immediately soaked his sweatshirt. Before Brock could stop himself, his hand moved toward the door handle. Instinct. Nothing more. A father seeing his son standing in the rain. But he stopped. Rebecca's voice echoed in his mind. Do not create opportunities for misunderstanding. Do not react emotionally. Do not give anyone ammunition. So Brock remained inside the truck. Mason ran toward the building. The moment passed. But it stayed with Brock the entire day. Later that evening, he wrote 2 extra pages in the notebook. Not about the rain, about patience. Because patience was becoming harder, far harder than anger. Anger was easy. Patience required discipline. The following week brought Sophie's birthday, 8 years old. Brock had never missed one before, not one. He had attended every birthday party, every school performance, every dance recital, every parent night. Now he wasn't even allowed to deliver a present. Still, he bought one, a small horse figurine, hand-painted, exactly the kind she collected. He wrapped it carefully, added a card, then drove to Briarwood. The front office secretary recognized him immediately. Her smile disappeared, not out of cruelty, out of discomfort. People often became uncomfortable around pain. Brock placed the gift on the counter. This is for Sophie. The secretary looked uncertain. I don't know if we're allowed to. It isn't for her today. He kept his voice calm. It's simply a birthday gift from her father. The woman glanced toward the administrative offices, then back at Brock. I'm sorry, the answer came quietly, but we can't accept it. Brock looked at the package. A blue ribbon, her favorite color. He had spent 20 minutes choosing it. I understand. He picked up the gift, turned around, walked back outside. No argument, no scene, nothing dramatic. But halfway across the parking lot he stopped. For several seconds he simply stood there holding the box. Then he continued walking. That evening he placed the unopened gift inside Sophie's bedroom closet at home, waiting, just in case. The weeks continued. Spring slowly gave way to early summer. The same truck, the same parking space, the same routine. Eventually people began noticing him. Not the parents. Most were too busy. Not the teachers. Most avoided eye contact. It was the school security guard, an older man named Frank Delaney, retired police officer, 67 years old, gray mustache, slow walk, sharp eyes. Frank saw everything. One morning, Frank crossed the street, carrying a coffee cup. Brock lowered his window. The old man stopped beside the truck. You here every day? Brock nodded. Pretty much. Frank looked toward the school entrance, then back at Brock. I've noticed. Neither spoke for several seconds. Finally, Frank said, You haven't caused a single problem. Brock smiled faintly. Wasn't planning to. Frank nodded. I know. Another silence. Then Frank took a sip of coffee. People keep expecting you to snap. Brock looked away. Maybe they're disappointed. The old guard laughed softly. Then his expression became serious. "You recording anything?" Brock pointed toward the dashboard camera mounted near the windshield. "Every day." Frank nodded approvingly. "Good." Brock noticed the change immediately. The old man wasn't making conversation anymore. He was giving advice. "What makes you say that?" Frank glanced toward the school, then lowered his voice. "Because memories lie." Brock waited. Frank continued. "But cameras don't." The words lingered. Simple, direct, important. Brock thought about them for the rest of the day. That evening he upgraded the storage system for the dash cam, purchased additional hard drives, organized footage by date, created backups. Every morning, every afternoon, every interaction, every appearance, saved, archived, protected. Weeks later, while reviewing footage, Brock noticed something unexpected. The camera wasn't only recording the school, it was recording him. Day after day. Same truck, same location, same behavior, no confrontations, no harassment, no aggression, nothing. Just a father showing up, again, and again, and again. A quiet record of consistency, a quiet record of restraint, a quiet record of presence. The realization changed something. For the first time, Brock understood that evidence wasn't only proving what happened. It was proving what didn't happen. No threats, no stalking, no violence, no instability, only patience, the kind nobody talked about, the kind nobody noticed, until they needed proof. One Friday morning, Frank approached the truck again. The school year was nearly over. Students rushed toward the entrance carrying end-of-year projects. Parents chatted near the sidewalks. The security guard stopped beside Brock's window. His expression looked unusually serious. "Keep recording everything." Brock frowned. "I am." "No." Frank shook his head. "Everything." The emphasis caught Brock's attention. "What happened?" The old man looked toward the building, then back at Brock. "Nothing yet?" "Yet." A small word, a dangerous word. Brock felt a chill move through him. Frank took another sip of coffee, then started walking away. After several steps, he turned back. One final sentence. "People who tell lies usually forget details." He pointed toward the camera. "The truth doesn't." Then he continued across the street. Brock sat motionless inside the truck, watching the school, watching the children, watching the place where his own son and daughter disappeared behind the doors every morning. For the first time, he had the feeling that the evidence gathering around him wasn't random anymore. It was becoming something else, something larger, something capable of surviving a courtroom. And somewhere deep inside, Brock sensed the first small crack beginning to appear in the story everyone else believed. The first real break in the case arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. It didn't come from a courtroom. It didn't come from a witness. And it certainly didn't come from Olivia. It arrived inside a manila folder sitting on Rebecca Turner's desk. Brock had driven downtown after finishing a maintenance shift. Outside, summer heat shimmered above the streets of Des Moines. Inside Rebecca's office, the air conditioner hummed steadily, while stacks of documents covered nearly every available surface. Rebecca was reading through school enrollment records when she suddenly stopped. She read the same page twice, then a third time. Brock noticed immediately. "What is it?" Rebecca didn't answer right away. She removed her glasses, looked at another document, then returned to the first. Finally, she leaned back. "I think Olivia made a mistake." Brock remained silent. He had learned that Rebecca only spoke like that when she was certain of something. "What kind of mistake?" Rebecca tapped the paperwork. "A careless one." She slid the file across the desk. Brock looked down. The document was a student residency form submitted to Briarwood Elementary shortly after Olivia left. Most parents never paid attention to forms like that. Rebecca did. The address listed for Mason and Sophie belonged to a townhouse on the west side of the city. Rebecca pointed at it. "You recognize this address?" Brock nodded. "It's her friend Jennifer's place. Does Olivia live there?" "No," Rebecca nodded. "That's what I thought." She opened another folder. This one contained utility records, a water bill, an electricity statement, property tax information, all connected to the same address, none connected to Olivia. Rebecca folded her hands. "School districts take residency seriously." Brock looked at the paperwork. "What does this mean?" "It means she may have provided inaccurate information." "Can that help us?" Rebecca's expression remained cautious. "Maybe." That answer frustrated Brock. Not because it was wrong, because it was honest. The legal system moved slowly. Every piece mattered, but rarely by itself. Still, Brock felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Momentum, small, fragile, but real. For the next several weeks, he continued gathering records. Rebecca's instructions never changed. Save everything. So Brock saved everything. Medical records showing he attended pediatric appointments, school activity receipts, registration forms, email chains, photographs, permission slips, anything demonstrating his involvement as a father. The evidence told a story. Not through emotion, through repetition. Over and over, Brock's name appeared. Parent volunteer, emergency contact, pickup authorization, field trip chaperone, baseball registration, dance recital transportation. The pattern was impossible to ignore. For years, Brock had been deeply involved in his children's lives. Not occasionally, consistently. The growing collection filled an entire storage box. Then another. One evening, Brock sat alone at the kitchen table, organizing documents. Sophie's empty chair stood across from him. Mason's favorite cereal bowl remained in the cabinet. Neither child had stepped inside the house for months. Yet Brock refused to pack away their things. Not yet. The clock read 9:47 p.m. Outside, a summer thunderstorm rolled across the neighborhood. Rain struck the windows. Lightning flashed. Brock continued sorting paperwork. Then he heard something. A metallic sound. Small, almost hidden beneath the storm. He looked up. Another noise. The mailbox? Brock frowned. Nobody delivered mail this late. He stood, crossed the living room, opened the front door. Rain immediately blew across the porch. The street was empty. No cars, no people, nothing, only darkness and rain. He walked to the mailbox, opened it. Inside sat a single folded piece of notebook paper. Nothing else. Brock's pulse quickened. He unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was unmistakable. 12-year-old handwriting. Messy, uneven, familiar. Mason. For several seconds, Brock simply stared, unable to move, unable to breathe properly. Then he read the sentence. "Dad, why did you leave us?" That was all. 7 words. No signature, no explanation, no address, no second page. Just 7 words. Brock read them again, and again, and again. The rain soaked his shoulders. He didn't notice, because something inside him had just broken. Not from anger, not from fear, from understanding. Until that moment, Brock suspected Olivia was influencing the children. Now he knew. Mason believed it. The lie had reached him, taken root, become real. Brock lowered himself onto the porch steps, the note trembling slightly in his hands. A memory surfaced immediately. Mason at age 7, learning to ride a bicycle, falling 3 times, getting back up 4, looking at Brock afterward and saying, "You said you wouldn't let go." And Brock hadn't. Not then, not now. Yet somehow the boy believed otherwise. The realization hurt in a way court orders never could. Court orders restricted access. Lies changed memories. The second wound ran much deeper. Brock remained on the porch for nearly 20 minutes, listening to rain, holding the note. Eventually he stood, walked inside, and called Rebecca. She answered on the third ring. "Brock? I got something." Her voice sharpened instantly. "What kind of something?" "A note." Silence. Then, "From who?" "Mason." Another pause. "Are you sure?" 100%. Rebecca exhaled slowly. "Read it." Brock did. The line hung in the air after he finished. Neither spoke for several seconds. Finally, Rebecca said, "Don't write back." "I know." "Don't leave messages." "I know." "Don't assume how it got there." Brock closed his eyes. "I know." The frustration wasn't directed at her. Rebecca understood that. "You okay?" The question surprised him. People rarely asked that anymore. They asked about evidence, court dates, paperwork, strategies. Not him. Brock looked at the note. "No." His voice remained calm. "But I'll be okay." Rebecca remained silent for a moment. Then she said something important. "The note helps." Brock laughed once, a humorless sound. "It doesn't feel like help." "No?" Her voice softened. "It feels awful." She paused. "But it proves something." "What?" "Someone has been telling a story directly to the children." Brock looked down. Rebecca continued. "And stories can be challenged." The words stayed with him after the call ended. Stories can be challenged. Not immediately, not easily, but eventually. The next morning, Brock arrived at his usual parking spot across from Briarwood Elementary. 7:12 a.m., same truck, same coffee, same notebook. The drop-off line began moving. Parents unloaded children. Teachers waved. Life continued. Then he saw Mason. The boy stepped from Olivia's SUV carrying a backpack. For a brief moment he stood alone beside the curb. Brock watched carefully, trying to see the child beneath the confusion, trying to see the boy who once waited at the front window every evening for his father to come home from work. Mason looked older now, more guarded, more uncertain. The distance between them felt far greater than the width of the street. Brock reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out the folded note, read it one final time. "Dad, why did you leave us?" Then he carefully placed it inside the notebook. Another piece of evidence, another piece of heartbreak, another piece of the truth. As Mason disappeared through the school doors, Brock made a silent promise. He wouldn't fight Olivia through social media. He wouldn't fight through rumors. He wouldn't fight through anger. He would fight through facts, because somewhere inside Briarwood Elementary, his son genuinely believed his father had chosen to leave. And Brock realized that proving otherwise might become the most important battle of his life. The hearing lasted less than 40 minutes. The consequences lasted much longer. Brock Barnes arrived at the Polk County Courthouse on a gray September morning, carrying 2 folders and a notebook. Rebecca Turner carried 6 boxes. That alone explained the difference between emotion and preparation. Brock wore a clean blue button-down shirt he had owned for years. Nothing expensive, nothing designed to impress, just neat, pressed, respectful. Rebecca preferred it that way. Across the hallway, Olivia Barnes sat beside her attorney. She looked completely different from the woman who had left the note on the kitchen counter months earlier. Professional makeup, tailored cream-colored blazer, perfect posture, perfect expression. To anyone seeing the situation for the first time, the contrast was striking. Olivia looked composed. Brock looked tired. The long months had left their mark. Early mornings, late-night document reviews, endless uncertainty. The strain showed in his face. and Brock understood something important. First impressions mattered, especially in family court. But facts mattered more, at least eventually. The courtroom itself was smaller than most people imagined. No dramatic television moments, no packed audience, just lawyers, court staff, a judge, and two parents fighting over the future of their children. Judge Harold Whitaker entered precisely at 9:00 a.m. Everyone stood. The hearing began. Rebecca had warned Brock beforehand. "This is temporary." He remembered her saying it 3 separate times. Temporary, not final, not permanent. Temporary. Yet temporary orders often shaped everything that followed. The attorney representing Olivia wasted no time. His strategy was obvious from the beginning. Create urgency, create concern, create doubt. He described Brock as unstable, emotionally unavailable, financially unreliable, a father who had withdrawn from family responsibilities long before the separation. Most of the claims lacked specifics, but that didn't stop them from sounding convincing, especially when presented confidently. Brock listened quietly. His jaw tightened once, only once, when the attorney suggested Mason and Sophie felt abandoned long before Olivia left. That statement hit harder than the others, because Brock knew where it came from, the children, or at least what they had been told. Rebecca placed a hand lightly on his arm. A reminder, stay calm. Brock nodded. The attorney continued. He failed to prioritize his family. He spent excessive time away from the home. He created an environment lacking emotional support. The words echoed through the courtroom. Brock noticed something strange. Almost none of the accusations contained dates, or records, or evidence. Mostly conclusions, mostly opinions, mostly narratives. But narratives were powerful, especially before all the facts were available. When Rebecca stood, the atmosphere changed. She didn't begin with emotion. She didn't attack Olivia. She didn't raise her voice. She simply opened a folder. Your Honor, we disagree with the characterization presented today. Judge Whitaker nodded. Proceed. Rebecca placed several documents before the court. Employment records, pay stubs, tax filings, work schedules, simple things, boring things, but reliable things. She established one point clearly. Brock worked consistently, steadily, for years. Not glamorous work, not high-status work, but honest work. Then she introduced school records, medical records, volunteer logs, attendance sheets, evidence showing Brock's participation in his children's lives, again and again. The picture emerging from the documents differed sharply from the one being described by Olivia's attorney. Still, Rebecca remained careful. This wasn't the trial. This wasn't the final battle. This was only the opening phase. The judge listened, asked questions, took notes. Then came the issue that worried Brock most: contact. Rebecca requested regular access to Mason and Sophie. Olivia's attorney opposed it immediately. He argued that contact could create emotional confusion for the children. The phrase irritated Brock. Emotional confusion. As if children somehow benefited from losing a parent. As if absence healed confusion instead of creating it. But he said nothing. Rebecca had prepared him for this possibility. Judge Whitaker reviewed the filings, read several pages, then leaned back. The room became quiet. Everyone understood what was coming. Temporary decisions, temporary consequences, sometimes temporary damage. The judge spoke carefully, measured, professional. Given the competing claims and the current circumstances, temporary restrictions would remain in place, pending further review. The words landed heavily, not because they were unexpected, because they were real. Brock kept his expression neutral. Inside disappointment settled across him like wet concrete. The judge continued. Additional evidence would be reviewed. Further hearings would be scheduled. The matter remained unresolved. Unresolved. That single word became the entire hearing. Nothing decided, nothing concluded, nothing fixed. Yet the restrictions remained. And that meant more waiting, more documentation, more patience. The hearing ended. People gathered papers. Lawyers exchanged brief comments. Court staff prepared for the next case. Life moved forward. Brock remained seated for several seconds. Not because he was stunned, because he was calculating. How many more mornings outside the school? How many more weeks? How many more months? Rebecca finished organizing her files. Then, as Gwen looked toward him. Ready. Brock stood. Together they walked into the hallway. The courthouse felt strangely loud after the controlled silence of the courtroom. Footsteps echoed across polished floors. Phones rang. Elevators opened and closed. Life continued. Olivia exited through another corridor with her attorney. Brock watched briefly, then looked away. Following her wouldn't help. Arguing wouldn't help. Nothing emotional would help. Rebecca knew exactly what he was thinking. Don't measure today by the ruling. Brock frowned. What else am I supposed to measure it by? The information. They stopped near a large window overlooking downtown Des Moines. Traffic moved below. People hurried through crosswalks. Normal lives continuing. Rebecca adjusted the folders in her arms. Did you notice something? What? The accusations. Brock shrugged. There were a lot of them? Exactly. Rebecca smiled slightly. Accusations. He waited. No documents? No dates? No proof? She tapped one of her boxes. We have proof. Brock understood her point. Intellectually. Emotionally was another matter. The hearing still felt like a loss. Not total, but significant. Rebecca seemed to read his thoughts. It always feels this way. What does the beginning? She nodded towards the courthouse. The beginning favors whoever tells the story first. Brock looked through the window. Olivia had definitely told the story first. Months before, he even realized a story was being told. Rebecca continued. But eventually, stories have to survive evidence. The sentence stayed with him. Eventually. Not today. Not next week. Eventually. Outside the courthouse, cool wind swept through the parking lot. The sky threatened rain. Brock and Rebecca walked toward their vehicles. Before reaching his truck, Brock stopped. How long? Rebecca knew exactly what he meant. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked toward the clouds gathering above the city. Then back at him. Long enough for the truth to become expensive. Brock frowned. Expensive? For whoever is hiding it? The answer surprised him. Then Rebecca added something else. Something he would remember for months. Lies age badly. With that, she entered her car and left. Brock stood beside his truck, alone. The courthouse behind him. The uncertain future ahead. The temporary order folded neatly inside a folder under his arm. For several moments he simply stared at the document. A judge's signature. A court seal. Words limiting access to the two people he loved most. The temptation to feel defeated was strong. Very strong. But Brock had spent months gathering evidence. Months showing restraint. Months proving consistency. One hearing wouldn't erase that. He opened the truck door, placed the folder carefully on the passenger seat, then looked at the notebook beside it. The same notebook he carried every day. The same notebook that continued growing. Page after page. Fact after fact, date after date. He started the engine. The radio remained off. His thoughts were loud enough. As he pulled away from the courthouse, one question finally escaped him. A quiet question spoken to an empty truck. How long until facts matter? The words disappeared into the silence. But somewhere ahead beyond the rumors and accusations and temporary orders, The answer was waiting, and Brock intended to find it. The first storage box filled up in October. The second filled before Thanksgiving. By Christmas, Brock Barnes had converted half of his dining room into what looked less like a home and more like an investigation. Folders lined one wall. Labeled binders filled shelves. External hard drives sat inside locked drawers. Every document had a date. Every photograph had a timestamp. Every email had a printed copy. Most people would have considered it excessive. Rebecca Turner considered it progress. One snowy evening, she stood in Brock's dining room reviewing the growing collection. Outside, Iowa wind rattled the windows. Inside, the table disappeared beneath paperwork. Rebecca picked up a folder, then another, then another. Finally, she nodded. "This is becoming useful." Brock laughed quietly. "Useful isn't exactly the word I'd use." Rebecca ignored the comment. She continued sorting. Employment records, medical records, school communications, volunteer logs. Each category received its own section. Each section strengthened the same argument. Brock hadn't abandoned his children. He had been involved in nearly every part of their lives, consistently, predictably, reliably. The evidence wasn't dramatic. That was precisely why it mattered. Truth rarely arrived dramatically. Truth arrived through repetition. The same behavior, repeated over time, again and again. Rebecca opened another folder. Inside were photographs, hundreds of them, Mason's Little League games, Sophie's dance recitals, school science fairs, field trips, birthday parties, normal moments, the kind people rarely appreciate until they become evidence. Rebecca spread several photos across the table. Every picture told a similar story. Brock was there. Not occasionally, almost always, behind the camera, beside the stage, standing near the dugout, helping with projects, holding jackets, carrying backpacks, present. The pattern mattered. Family courts paid attention to patterns. Rebecca knew that, which was why she kept collecting. One Saturday morning, she arrived carrying another box. This one contained something different. Security footage. Brock looked up from the kitchen counter. "What's that?" Rebecca placed the box down. "A gift from your neighbor." That got his attention. Mrs. Parker lived directly across the street from the Barnes family home. Retired, observant, the kind of person who noticed everything. Rebecca opened the box. Inside were several flash drives. Her security cameras. Brock frowned. "From what?" Rebecca smiled slightly. "The night Olivia left." The room became silent. Brock stared at the drives. Months had passed since that morning. Months. Yet suddenly it felt close again. Rebecca continued. "Mrs. Parker upgraded her security system last year." She handed Brock a drive. "Multiple camera angles." "What do they show?" "We're still reviewing everything." The answer frustrated him. Not because it was wrong, because he wanted certainty. Rebecca understood. She always did. "Don't expect miracles." Brock nodded. "Okay." But hope appeared anyway. Small, careful, dangerous. The following week, Rebecca called unexpectedly. "Can you come to my office?" Her voice sounded different, focused. Brock recognized the tone immediately. Something mattered. 20 minutes later, he walked into her office downtown. Rebecca already had footage playing on a monitor. The timestamp displayed the date Olivia left. 3:04 a.m., the image showed the Barnes driveway. A familiar SUV, several boxes, movement. Rebecca paused the video. "Watch." She rewound, pressed play. Brock leaned forward. Olivia appeared carrying luggage, then more luggage, then children's belongings, multiple trips, multiple boxes, multiple hours. Nothing surprising. Then Rebecca paused again. "Look at the timestamp." Brock did. 3:47 a.m. His shift ended at 3:30. He would have been driving home. Rebecca nodded. "As far as we can tell, she started moving property before you arrived." Brock studied the footage. A detail stood out. Not the boxes, not the timing, the planning. Nothing about the move appeared spontaneous. Everything looked organized, prepared, intentional. Rebecca seemed to reach the same conclusion. This wasn't an emergency departure. Brock remained silent. The video continued. Trip after trip, box after box, decision after decision. Months earlier, Brock had already suspected Olivia planned everything. Now he was watching evidence. That felt different. Evidence carried weight. Suspicion did not. Over the next several weeks, more information arrived. Slowly, piece by piece. The case resembled a puzzle. Each piece looked insignificant alone. Together they began forming a picture. Then Rebecca made another discovery, one she didn't immediately share. Instead, she spent nearly 3 days verifying it. When she finally called Brock, her first sentence was simple. "I found someone." The words meant little without context. "Who?" "A teacher." Brock sat upright. "What teacher?" "Emily Carter." Recognition came instantly. Emily had taught 2nd grade at Briarwood, several years earlier. Sophie's favorite teacher. The woman who once convinced Sophie that reading wasn't boring. Brock remembered her well. "Why is she important?" Rebecca opened a folder as she spoke. "Because she remembers things." 2 days later, Brock sat across from Emily Carter inside a small coffee shop near downtown Des Moines. She looked exactly as he remembered. Friendly, direct, observant. After a few minutes of conversation, Rebecca asked the important question. "What do you remember about Brock as a parent?" Emily didn't hesitate. "He was everywhere." Brock looked down. The answer surprised him. Not because it was positive, because it was immediate. Emily continued. "Most parents show up occasionally." She shrugged. "Brock showed up constantly." Rebecca took notes. "Can you be more specific?" Emily smiled. "Field trips, parent nights, reading days, school events." She looked toward Brock. "Honestly, he was one of the most involved parents I've ever worked with." The statement settled heavily across the table. Not because it changed everything, because it came from someone independent, someone with no reason to lie, no reason to exaggerate, no reason to help. The meeting lasted nearly an hour. By the end, Rebecca possessed another valuable witness, another credible voice, another piece of the puzzle. As Brock walked toward his truck afterward, something felt different. Not victory, not yet, but progress, real progress. Then 2 weeks later, Rebecca called again. This time her voice sounded sharper, more alert. "Brock, what happened? I think I found the next problem." He immediately knew what she meant. Problems usually meant opportunities. "What is it?" There was a pause. Then she spoke a name. "Grant Holloway." Brock frowned. The name sounded vaguely familiar. Nothing more. "Who is that?" Rebecca shuffled papers. 42 years old. Another page turned. "Real estate developer." Another. "Recently involved with Olivia." Brock stared out his kitchen window. Snow drifted across the backyard. For several seconds he said nothing, then asked the obvious question. "How involved?" Rebecca answered carefully. "More than casually." The room became very quiet. Brock wasn't surprised that Olivia had moved on. Months had passed. That wasn't the issue. The timing was. The connections were. The unanswered questions were. Rebecca continued. "I'm still researching." "What did you find?" "Financial transfers." Brock's eyes narrowed. "What kind of transfers?" Rebecca paused, long enough for concern to appear. Money? More silence. Then she added the detail that changed everything. And there may be a connection between Grant Holloway and members of the Briarwood School Board. Brock stopped moving. For the first time in months, genuine alarm appeared. Not because of the money, not because of the relationship, because of the school, because Briarwood kept appearing, again and again and again, the same place, the same people, the same barriers, the same resistance. Rebecca's voice remained calm. We don't know what it means yet. But Brock knew enough. Connections mattered. Influence mattered. And if Grant Holloway's name truly reached into the same system that had helped isolate him from his children, then the case might be larger than he originally believed. For months, Brock had been fighting a story. Now he was beginning to wonder whether he was also fighting a network of people invested in keeping that story alive. And somewhere inside Rebecca's growing collection of files, the answer was waiting. Brock Barnes first saw Grant Holloway in person on a cold February evening. Until then, Grant had existed only inside documents. Bank records, property records, business filings, fragments of information gathered by Rebecca Turner. A name connected to Olivia, a name connected to money, a name connected to people around Briarwood Elementary. Nothing more. Then Brock received an invitation to the school's annual winter community fundraiser. Technically, parents, former parents, donors, and community members could attend. Rebecca encouraged him to go. Why? Brock asked. Rebecca looked up from her desk. Because people reveal things when they think they've already won. The answer stayed with him. 3 days later, Brock walked into the Briarwood Community Center. The fundraiser occupied the school's auxiliary gymnasium. Round tables covered the polished floor. String lights hung overhead. Local businesses sponsored silent auction items. Teachers chatted with parents. Children ran between tables carrying paper plates filled with cookies. Normal, comfortable, harmless, at least on the surface. Brock arrived alone. He wore dark jeans and a navy button-down shirt. Nothing flashy, nothing expensive. Several conversations softened when he entered. Not dramatically, just enough to notice. He had grown accustomed to that. People still knew the story, or at least the version Olivia told. Brock ignored the stares, collected a coffee, found a quiet place near the wall, and observed. Observation had become a habit. Across the room he spotted familiar faces. Diane Keller, several teachers, parents he recognized from baseball games and school events. Then he saw Olivia. For a brief moment, Brock barely recognized her. Not because she looked different, because she looked happy, relaxed, comfortable. The strain and tension that once filled their marriage seemed absent. She stood near the center of the room speaking with several donors, laughing, smiling, confident, and beside her stood Grant Holloway. The first thing Brock noticed was confidence, not arrogance. Not yet. Confidence. Grant carried himself like a man accustomed to being important. Tall, well-dressed, expensive watch, tailored charcoal suit, perfect posture, everything polished, everything deliberate. People gravitated toward him naturally, the way people often gravitated toward wealth. Brock watched quietly. Grant moved through conversations with practiced ease, shaking hands, remembering names, making people feel noticed, a useful skill in real estate development, and apparently in school politics. Rebecca arrived 15 minutes later. She immediately spotted Grant. There he is. Brock nodded. Looks successful. He is. Rebecca sipped coffee. Very. Brock kept watching. Something felt off. Not visibly, not obviously. Just beneath the surface. Grant wasn't behaving like a new boyfriend. He was behaving like someone establishing ownership. Ownership of relationships. Ownership of influence. Ownership of narrative. Then Brock noticed something else. Mason and Sophie. The children stood near Olivia. Both looked uncomfortable. Not frightened, not unhappy, just careful. Like children learning how to navigate adult expectations. Sophie's eyes occasionally wandered around the room. Mason mostly looked at the floor. Neither appeared excited to be there. Brock's chest tightened. Instinct told him to walk over, to say hello, to simply remind them he existed. But he remained where he was, because Rebecca was right. Every public interaction mattered. Every decision mattered. Patience mattered. So he stayed put. Then Grant noticed him. The change happened instantly. A glance across the room, recognition, assessment, decision. Grant excused himself from his conversation and began walking toward Brock. Rebecca saw it too. "Here we go." Brock remained calm. Grant approached with a friendly smile, the kind designed for public settings, the kind that looked good from a distance. "Mr. Barnes." Brock nodded. "Grant." The handshake that followed lasted exactly long enough. Neither man squeezed too hard. Neither attempted dominance. Both understood people were watching. Grant smiled. "I've heard a lot about you." The sentence sounded harmless. It wasn't. Brock recognized the subtle challenge immediately. Hopefully something accurate. Grant laughed. Several nearby parents smiled politely. Everyone wanted things to remain pleasant. Grant tilted his head slightly. "You know Olivia's doing a great job with the kids." Brock said nothing. Grant continued. "They've adjusted remarkably well." There it was, the first real jab. Small, polished, calculated. Brock took a sip of coffee, still saying nothing. Grant seemed disappointed. He tried again. "Mason's baseball coach says he's thriving." Another pause. "Sophie's teacher says she's doing wonderfully." Brock looked directly at him. "I'm glad." The answer surprised Grant. Not because it was aggressive, because it wasn't. For a brief moment, uncertainty crossed his face. Then the smile returned. "I guess that's what matters most," Brock nodded. "It is." Another silence. Awkward now. The conversation wasn't unfolding the way Grant expected, because Brock wasn't fighting, wasn't arguing, wasn't defending himself. Grant tried one final time. His voice lowered slightly, just enough that nearby people couldn't hear clearly. "Kids are resilient." Brock remained still. Grant smiled. "They don't hold on to absent parents forever." The sentence landed exactly as intended. Cruel, controlled, personal. Rebecca immediately looked toward Brock, waiting, watching. Several nearby parents glanced over. Everyone sensed tension. The room seemed quieter. Grant appeared confident, certain, expecting a reaction. Maybe anger, maybe embarrassment, maybe a public confrontation. Instead, Brock simply looked at him, calmly, then asked a single question. "Do you have children?" The answer caught Grant off guard. His expression shifted, briefly. "Yes." Brock nodded. "Then you should know the difference between being absent and being kept away." Silence. Complete silence. Grant's smile disappeared. Not dramatically. Just enough. The distinction mattered. Nearby conversations resumed. Music continued playing. Life moved forward. But something had changed. Grant realized Brock wasn't the man Olivia described. And Brock realized something else. Grant didn't actually know the full story, only the version he'd been given. The conversation ended shortly afterward. Grant excused himself, returned to another group. The fundraiser continued. But the evening wasn't finished. An hour later, while Rebecca and Brock reviewed silent auction items, a woman approached. Middle-aged, unknown, holding a smartphone. "You may want this." She handed the phone to Rebecca. A video was playing. Rebecca watched. then replayed it. Brock frowned. "What is it?" The woman smiled. "I recorded your conversation." Rebecca looked up. "Why?" The woman shrugged. "Because Grant does this. This. He likes pushing people." The video showed everything. The approach, the comments, the subtle provocations. Most importantly, it showed Brock's reaction, or lack of one. No anger, no threats, no aggression, only restraint. Rebecca watched it twice more, then smiled. The expression surprised Brock. Rebecca rarely smiled during this case. "What?" She handed him the phone. "Evidence." Brock watched the recording. For the first time, he saw the encounter from an outsider's perspective. Grant appeared confrontational. Brock appeared calm, reasonable, measured, exactly the opposite of the narrative being built against him. The woman emailed Rebecca a copy before leaving. Another file, another timestamp, another piece of the puzzle. As the fundraiser ended, parents began gathering coats and children. Grant reunited with Olivia. The four of them, Grant, Olivia, Mason, and Sophie, walked toward the parking lot together. For a brief moment, Sophie looked back. Not at Grant, not at Olivia, at Brock. The look lasted only seconds. Then she disappeared through the crowd. Brock watched until they were gone. Rebecca stood beside him. Neither spoke immediately. Finally, Brock broke the silence. "What kind of man is he?" Rebecca looked toward the empty doorway. "The kind who thinks appearances are reality." Brock nodded, because that description fit more than Grant. It fit the entire situation. For months, people judged what they could see. The polished businessman, the composed mother, the tired father sitting alone in a truck. Appearances told one story. Evidence told another. And thanks to a smartphone video recorded by a stranger, the evidence had just become stronger. But as Brock drove home that night, one sentence from Grant refused to leave his mind. They don't hold on to absent parents forever. Grant believed that. Maybe Olivia did too. Maybe they both assumed enough time would erase Brock from his children's lives. What neither of them understood was that Brock wasn't disappearing. He was documenting. And every day that passed added another page to a story far more durable than the one they were trying to sell. The school bus route wasn't supposed to matter. It was just another assignment, another line on a schedule, another collection of stops across the east side of Des Moines. Nothing more. At least that was what Brock Barnes thought when Midwestern Student Transportation reassigned drivers after spring break. Then he saw the route map, and everything changed. The new route passed within 2 blocks of Briarwood Elementary, not directly through school property, not close enough to violate any restrictions, but close enough to observe, close enough to notice things. Brock studied the map in silence. His supervisor stood beside him. "Any problem with it?" Brock folded the paper. "No." The supervisor nodded. "Good route," then walked away. Brock wasn't interested in the route itself. He was interested in what he might learn. For months he had watched from a parking space. Now he would see another side of his children's world, a side nobody expected him to notice. The route began at 6:35 each morning. The bus wound through quiet neighborhoods collecting students, small houses, apartment complexes, church parking lots, normal places, normal children, normal routines. Brock drove carefully. Always had. Years of transporting students made caution automatic. Every stop mattered. Every child mattered. Every parent trusted him with something valuable. The responsibility was never lost on him. 3 weeks into the route, Brock noticed Mason for the first time. Not as a passenger, as a pedestrian. The boy was walking with Sophie toward Briarwood. Olivia's SUV wasn't there. Neither was Grant's. Apparently someone had dropped them several blocks away. Brock slowed slightly as the bus approached an intersection. Not enough to attract attention, just enough to observe. Mason walked beside his sister, carrying his backpack over one shoulder. Sophie's backpack appeared almost too large for her small frame. Everything seemed normal. Then 3 boys approached from behind. Middle school age, louder than necessary, confident in the way children often become when surrounded by friends. At first, Brock couldn't hear the conversation. Then the bus stopped at a nearby corner. The distance narrowed. Voices carried through the open driver's side window. One boy laughed. Another said something. Then Brock heard the words clearly. "At least my dad didn't leave." The sentence hit instantly. Not because of the cruelty, because of the familiarity. Someone had taught it to them. Children rarely invent stories like that. They repeat them. Mason stopped walking. Sophie's shoulders tightened immediately. The boys laughed again. One repeated the comment. Another added something Brock couldn't fully hear. But he didn't need to. The damage was obvious. For several seconds, Brock expected Mason to ignore them, to keep walking. Instead, the boy turned around. Not aggressively, not dramatically, just enough. Then he stepped slightly in front of Sophie, positioning himself between the comments and his younger sister. The movement lasted less than a second. Most people wouldn't have noticed. Brock did, because it reminded him of something. Himself. The same protective instinct, the same reflex, the same unwillingness to let someone smaller absorb the damage alone. One of the boys continued talking. Mason said something back, too quiet to hear. The exchange ended. The boys walked away. The moment passed. Traffic resumed. The bus moved forward. But Brock couldn't stop thinking about it, not because Mason had been insulted, because Mason had believed enough of the lie to ask why his father left, yet still defended Sophie when someone weaponized the story. The contradiction mattered. Children rarely hate the people they miss. That realization stayed with Brock all day. That evening he documented everything: time, location, description, witnesses. Rebecca's training had become habit. The next morning he called her. After listening, Rebecca asked a simple question. "Did the school know?" Brock frowned. "How would I know? That's what I want to find out." The answer seemed strange. At first, then it made sense. Schools were responsible for student welfare. Bullying policies existed for a reason. If children repeatedly used the same story against Mason and Sophie, someone should have noticed. Someone should have intervened. The question was whether they had, or whether they chose not to. A week later, Brock witnessed another incident. Then another. Nothing severe, nothing headline-worthy. Just small comments, small jokes, small wounds. The kind adults often dismissed. The kind children remembered forever. Each event followed the same pattern. Mason rarely defended himself, but he always defended Sophie. Always. That detail appeared repeatedly in Brock's notebook. By May, the entries filled several pages. Rebecca reviewed them carefully, then made a decision. "We need to report it." Brock looked up. "To who?" "The district." Not the school, not Briarwood. The district. There was a difference. Rebecca explained why. If Briarwood is ignoring it, we go above Briarwood. The complaint was detailed. Dates, locations, descriptions, policies. Everything documented. No emotion, no accusations, only facts. Rebecca submitted the report directly to Des Moines Public Schools. Then they waited. Again. Waiting had become a permanent feature of Brock's life. Days passed. Then another week. Nothing. Then one Tuesday afternoon, Brock received a phone call. Unknown number. He answered. "Hello?" A professional voice responded. "Mr. Barnes?" "Yes. My name is Noah Simmons." Brock sat upright. Noah continued. I'm an investigator with the District Student Services Office. The words immediately caught his attention. Investigator, not administrator, not counselor, investigator. I received your complaint. Brock glanced toward Rebecca's office where she sat reviewing documents. I see. Noah continued. I'd like to ask a few questions. The conversation lasted nearly 40 minutes. Unlike previous officials, Noah didn't seem interested in assumptions. He wanted specifics, times, locations, names, documentation, evidence, the same language Rebecca always used. By the end of the call, Brock felt something unfamiliar. Respect, not friendship, not support, professional respect. Noah sounded like someone interested in facts. That alone made him different from many people Brock had encountered. 2 days later, Noah requested copies of several documents. Rebecca sent them immediately. 3 days after that, he requested more. Then attendance records, then communications, then policy documents. The requests kept coming, which meant one thing. He was finding something. Investigators only kept digging when they believed digging mattered. The realization energized Rebecca. For the first time in weeks, she appeared genuinely optimistic. One evening, she spread several district documents across her conference table, then pointed toward a highlighted section. Look. Brock leaned forward. What am I looking at? Procedure. Rebecca tapped the page. If bullying complaints were made, certain actions should have occurred. Brock read silently. Parent notification, documentation, follow-up review, intervention. Clear steps, clear requirements. Rebecca folded her arms. Now the question becomes simple. What question? She looked directly at him. Did Briarwood follow its own rules? The room became quiet, because both already suspected the answer. Not completely, not consistently, possibly not at all. 3 days later, Noah called again. This time his tone sounded different, less neutral, more focused. Mr. Barnes, I found several inconsistencies. Brock immediately reached for a pen. What kind? There was a pause. Then Noah spoke carefully. I'm not prepared to discuss conclusions yet. The answer frustrated him, but Noah continued. I can tell you that some records don't match. Brock's pulse quickened. What records? Another pause. Then the investigator delivered the sentence that changed everything. School communications regarding your children appear incomplete. Incomplete. Such a small word. Yet Brock immediately understood the significance. Missing information, missing reports, missing documentation, missing truth. Whatever Noah was uncovering, it wasn't random. And for the first time, someone outside Rebecca's office had begun seeing the same cracks Brock had been documenting for months. As the call ended, Brock looked across the room at the growing mountain of evidence. The notebooks, the folders, the recordings, the reports, months of patience, months of restraint, months of showing up. And now, finally, someone inside the system was beginning to ask the same questions he had been asking all along. Questions that Briarwood Elementary might soon have difficulty answering. The breakthrough didn't arrive with a dramatic confession. There was no surprise witness, no secret recording, no moment where everything suddenly became clear. Instead, it arrived the way most real breakthroughs do. One document, then another, until the pattern became impossible to ignore. By early summer, Noah Simmons had been investigating Briarwood Elementary for nearly 6 weeks. Long enough to ask uncomfortable questions, long enough to compare records, long enough to discover that some versions of events didn't match others. Rebecca Turner knew what that usually meant. Someone had been careless. Carelessness was dangerous, because lies required consistency. Truth didn't. One Wednesday afternoon, Noah requested a meeting. Not a phone call, Not an email, a meeting. That alone told Rebecca something important. People rarely scheduled meetings to discuss nothing. The three of them met inside a conference room at the Des Moines Public Schools Administration Building. The room was plain. White walls, fluorescent lights, a long table, nothing remarkable, except for the stack of files Noah placed in front of him. The stack was thick, very thick. Brock noticed immediately. Noah opened the first folder. "I want to be clear." His tone remained professional. "I'm not making conclusions today." Rebecca nodded. "Understood." Noah slid several documents across the table. "But I am identifying inconsistencies." Brock leaned forward. The investigator opened a report, then another, then a spreadsheet. For nearly 20 minutes he walked them through the findings. Most seemed small at first. Tiny discrepancies, missing signatures, incomplete notes, unrecorded conversations. But taken together they formed a larger picture, a troubling one. Then Noah reached the first major issue, school visitation records. Brock immediately recognized the forms. Every parent visit should be documented. Every meeting, every request, every denial. The system existed for accountability. Noah pointed toward one section. According to these records, Mr. Barnes attempted contact multiple times. Rebecca nodded. "We know." Noah flipped to another page. "According to administrative notes, some of those contacts don't exist." The room became quiet. Brock frowned. "What does that mean?" Noah answered directly. "It means someone documented one version of events internally and another version elsewhere." Rebecca's pen stopped moving. That got her attention. Inconsistency inside official records mattered. A lot. Noah continued. "There are also gaps." "What kind of gaps?" The investigator opened another folder. "Missing follow-up reports." Rebecca exchanged a glance with Brock. The same issue again. Missing information. The pattern was becoming familiar. Noah continued presenting. Parent communication logs, student welfare reports, administrative notes. Each category revealed something slightly different, but all pointed in the same direction. The record-keeping surrounding Mason and Sophie Barnes was unusually incomplete, unusually selective, unusually favorable toward one side. By the end of the meeting, Rebecca looked more energized than Brock had seen in months. Noah wasn't proving misconduct. Not yet, but he was proving inconsistency, and inconsistency created opportunity. After the meeting, Rebecca returned directly to her office. She spent the rest of the afternoon reviewing old evidence, comparing timelines, cross-checking dates, building connections. At 8:17 p.m., she called Brock. "Get over here." The sentence contained no greeting, no explanation, just urgency. 25 minutes later, Brock walked into her office. Several monitors glowed across the room. Folders covered the conference table. Rebecca pointed toward a chair. "Sit." He did, without asking questions. Rebecca clicked a remote. A video appeared. Security footage, black and white, grainy, time-stamped. Brock recognized the location immediately. Briarwood Elementary, specifically the eastern parking lot, the same area visible from his usual parking spot across the street. The footage showed vehicles arriving, children exiting, teachers directing traffic, normal school activity. Rebecca paused the recording. "What do you see?" Brock shrugged. "Parents dropping off kids." "Exactly." She resumed playback. Another day, another recording, then another, and another. Dozens of mornings, weeks, months. The footage continued. Brock finally understood. The cameras were capturing him. Every day, every morning. Same truck, same parking space, same routine. Rebecca paused again. "You know what's interesting?" "What?" She leaned back. "Nothing. Brock frowned. Nothing? Rebecca nodded. No confrontations. Click. New video. No harassment. Click. New video. No disturbances. Click. No aggressive behavior. Click. No attempts to approach the children. The realization slowly settled across the room. The footage wasn't proving what happened. It was proving what never happened, day after day, month after month. Brock appeared exactly as he claimed, a father sitting quietly across from a school, watching, waiting, documenting. Nothing more. Rebecca smiled slightly. The cameras remember. The phrase sounded familiar. Frank Delaney had said something similar months earlier. Memories lie, cameras don't. Now Brock understood. The recordings weren't merely background evidence. They were independent witnesses. Thousands of hours of independent witnesses. Rebecca continued. Most accusations require behavior. She pointed toward the screen. This is the absence of behavior. And absence mattered, especially when people claimed things that never occurred. The following week produced another breakthrough. This one came from Mrs. Parker's security footage. The same recordings captured the night Olivia moved out. For months, Rebecca had been reviewing fragments, cross-referencing timestamps, comparing movements, looking for patterns. Now she found one, a significant one. The footage clearly showed Olivia loading belongings for hours before Brock arrived home from work. Not minutes, hours, planning, preparation, coordination. The departure wasn't spontaneous. It wasn't reactive. It wasn't an emergency. It was organized. Rebecca added the footage to an expanding timeline, a visual timeline, one capable of showing events minute by minute. Then came the text messages. The messages arrived through discovery requests, slowly, painfully, piece by piece. Many were mundane, scheduling, school information, household logistics, nothing important, until Rebecca found one, a single conversation buried inside hundreds of pages. She read it twice, then a third time, then called Brock immediately. When he arrived, she handed him the page. Read this. Brock looked down. The exchange occurred between Olivia and a friend shortly after she left. The conversation wasn't long, just several messages, but one sentence stood out immediately. A sentence so simple it almost seemed harmless, until its meaning became clear. He's still trying to see them every day. Brock stared at the words, then continued reading. Another message followed. I know he didn't actually leave them, but they don't need that confusion right now. The room became silent, completely silent. Brock read the sentence again, then one more time. I know he didn't actually leave them. There it was. Not a courtroom statement, not a public statement, a private statement. The kind people made when they believed nobody important would ever read it. Rebecca folded her arms. What do you think? Brock looked up slowly. For months, people repeated Olivia's story. For months, Brock defended himself through evidence. For months, Mason believed his father chose to leave. And now, sitting on a single sheet of paper was something different. Acknowledgement. Private acknowledgement. Olivia knew, at least at one point. She knew Brock hadn't abandoned the children. The realization felt strangely calm, not satisfying, not triumphant, just clear. For the first time, Brock wasn't arguing against a rumor. He was holding proof that the person spreading the rumor knew better. Rebecca carefully placed the message inside a folder. Then another. Then the master evidence binder. The binder had grown enormous. Every section told part of the story. Employment, school records, video, witnesses, communications. Now text messages, layer after layer, fact after fact, truth building slowly, methodically, relentlessly. As Brock prepared to leave, Rebecca stopped him. There will be more. He nodded. I know. No, Her voice sharpened slightly. "There will be much more." Brock looked at her. Rebecca rarely made predictions, which meant she felt confident. "Why?" She tapped the text message. "Because once one lie cracks, people start looking at everything around it." The answer stayed with him all the way home. One lie cracks, then others follow. And for the first time since Olivia took the children, Brock could see the possibility of the story changing. Not through emotion, not through arguments, through evidence, the kind that kept growing stronger every week. And somewhere inside that growing mountain of evidence, the truth was beginning to speak for itself. The voicemail arrived on a Sunday night. At 11:43 p.m., Brock Barnes almost missed it. He had fallen asleep in the recliner beside the living room window. A baseball game played quietly on television. One of Mason's old gloves sat on the bookshelf nearby. The ringtone woke him. Unknown number. Brock glanced at the screen. Missed call, voicemail. His pulse immediately quickened. Almost nobody left voicemails anymore, especially unknown callers. He sat upright and pressed play. At first there was only static, then breathing, soft, uneven, the sound of someone struggling to speak. Brock listened carefully. For several seconds nothing happened. Then he heard crying, a child crying. The sound hit him instantly, not because he recognized the voice, because he recognized the pain. He increased the volume. The crying continued. A muffled sound followed, then one word, barely audible. "Dad?" The message ended. 7 seconds. That was all. Brock remained motionless, the phone still pressed against his ear. His heart pounded. He played it again, then another time. Each replay produced the same result. Breathing, crying, Dad. Nothing else. No explanation, no location, no caller identification. Only emotion, raw and unmistakable. By midnight he had listened 12 times. At 12:07 a.m. he called Rebecca Turner. She answered surprisingly quickly. "Brock, I got a voicemail." His voice alone told her something was wrong. "What kind of voicemail?" Brock replayed it through the phone. Rebecca said nothing until it finished. Then she asked him to play it again. He did. Silence followed. Finally she spoke. "Save multiple copies?" "I already did." "Good." Another pause. Then her tone changed. Professional, focused. "This matters." Brock looked toward the dark hallway leading to the children's bedrooms. "It sounds like Sophie." Rebecca didn't argue. She didn't agree either. Instead, she asked a different question. "Do we know who made the call?" "No." "Do we know where it came from?" "No." "Then we stay disciplined." Discipline. The word appeared again and again throughout the case. Discipline instead of emotion. Evidence instead of assumptions. Brock understood. But it wasn't easy, not when he had just heard what sounded like one of his children crying. The next morning, Rebecca contacted the phone company, then filed an emergency request related to the ongoing custody proceedings. Not because the voicemail proved everything, because it raised questions, important questions, questions judges often paid attention to. Meanwhile, Brock continued listening, not obsessively, not publicly, privately, late at night, early in the morning, trying to understand something hidden inside the 7-second recording. Each time he reached the same conclusion. The child sounded afraid, not of him, of something else. That distinction mattered. 3 days later, Rebecca arrived at Brock's house carrying paperwork. Lots of paperwork. She spread everything across the dining room table, court filings, supporting documents, evidence summaries. Brock recognized the look on her face. Determination. "We're requesting an emergency hearing." He nodded. "Because of the voicemail?" "Partly." Rebecca adjusted several pages. partly because of timing. What timing? She handed him a document. Brock scanned the page, then looked up. Another discovery. Another inconsistency. Rebecca pointed toward the highlighted section. Read the dates. He did. Several school communications, administrative reports, parent contact logs, all clustered around the same period. The period immediately before the voicemail. The pattern felt unusual. Rebecca agreed. Something changed. Brock frowned. What? I don't know yet. The answer irritated him. Not because it was wrong, because he wanted certainty. Rebecca never offered certainty before she earned it. That was one reason Brock trusted her. The following afternoon, another development occurred. One nobody expected. It began inside the Briarwood Elementary library and ended inside Brock's inbox. At 4:18 p.m., an email arrived from an unfamiliar address. The sender name simply read Mason B. Brock, stared at the screen. For several seconds he couldn't move. Then he opened it. The message contained only 3 sentences. Dad, Mom says if we see you again, you'll probably leave a second time. I don't know what's true anymore. Brock read the email twice, then a third time. His hands remained perfectly still. But inside something shifted. The sentence wasn't angry. It wasn't hateful. It wasn't accusatory. It was confused. Confusion meant uncertainty. Uncertainty meant the narrative wasn't holding as firmly as before. Immediately he forwarded the message to Rebecca. Her response arrived 4 minutes later. Don't reply. Save everything. I'm coming over. 40 minutes later, she sat across from him, reviewing the email. This came from a school library terminal. Brock looked up. How do you know? Rebecca pointed toward metadata. Most people ignored metadata. Lawyers didn't. School network. Another clue. Another breadcrumb. Another piece of evidence. Rebecca leaned back. This is important. Brock nodded. I know. No. Her voice sharpened slightly. You don't. He waited. Rebecca tapped the screen. This isn't a child repeating a story anymore. The statement lingered. Then she continued. This is a child questioning the story. The distinction mattered enormously. For months, Mason believed what he had been told. Now he was expressing doubt. Doubt created openings. Doubt created questions. Questions led to truth. Rebecca immediately added the email to the emergency hearing request. The filing grew larger, stronger, more urgent. Voicemail, email, school inconsistencies, district findings, everything connected. Days later, Judge Harold Whitaker reviewed the motion. No ruling arrived immediately. But something else did. An order, a narrow one, a specific one. The judge requested additional records, school records, communication records, and something else, cell phone records. Both Brock and Rebecca read the order twice, then looked at each other. Neither spoke for several moments, because both understood the significance. Cell phone records could reveal timing, messages, communication patterns, locations, connections, not always content, but enough. Sometimes far more than enough. The request extended to Olivia, which meant something important. The judge wasn't merely listening anymore. He was investigating. The shift felt subtle, yet significant. Judges often tolerated accusations. Judges became far more interested when accusations collided with evidence. That collision was finally happening. 1 week later, Brock sat in his truck across from Briarwood Elementary. 7:12 a.m., same spot, same routine. The parking lot filled slowly. Children arrived. Teachers waved. Parents rushed through drop-off. Life continued. Then he saw Sophie. The little girl stepped out of Olivia's SUV carrying a purple backpack. Nothing unusual, until she stopped. For one brief moment, she looked across the street. directly at Brock's truck. Not through it, not past it, at it, at him. The look lasted maybe 2 seconds, 3 at most. Then she continued toward the school, but something about it felt different. No fear, no panic, no immediate retreat, just recognition, and perhaps curiosity. Brock remained still, watching, waiting, documenting, the same way he always had. Yet that morning felt different, not because the case was over, far from it, because small cracks were beginning to appear. A voicemail, an email, questions from the children themselves, and now a judge requesting records that nobody expected to see. The story Olivia built remained standing, but it no longer looked unshakable. As students disappeared inside Briarwood's doors, Brock opened his notebook, added another entry, then closed it. For the first time in months, he had the feeling that the next hearing might not revolve around accusations. It might revolve around evidence, and evidence, unlike stories, had a habit of leading people somewhere they never intended to go. The hearing began at 8:30 on a rainy Thursday morning. Outside the Polk County Courthouse, spring rain washed across the sidewalks and turned the streets silver. Inside, everything felt sharper, more focused, more dangerous, because this hearing was different. For the first time, the case wasn't centered on accusations. It was centered on evidence. Brock Barnes arrived 20 minutes early. As usual, preparation had become routine. He carried a single binder. Rebecca Turner arrived carrying 4. The difference wasn't symbolic. It was practical. Months of documentation now occupied hundreds of pages. Emails, videos, witness statements, school records, phone logs, text messages, court filings. The collection had grown into something difficult to ignore. As they entered the courtroom, Brock immediately noticed Olivia. She sat beside her attorney. Grant Holloway occupied a seat directly behind her, confident, composed, expensive suit, expensive watch, the same image he always projected. But something felt different today. Subtle, small. The confidence looked less natural, as if it required effort. Rebecca noticed it too. She leaned toward Brock. People look different when evidence starts arriving. Brock didn't answer. He simply took his seat. Judge Harold Whitaker entered precisely on schedule. Everyone stood, then sat. The hearing began. Olivia's attorney started first. That alone surprised Rebecca. Normally they preferred reacting. Today they wanted control. The attorney spoke for nearly 15 minutes. He emphasized stability, consistency, routine. He argued that the children were adjusting well, that changing arrangements could create disruption, that continued caution remained appropriate. The presentation sounded polished, professional, reasonable, but something important was missing: new evidence. The argument relied heavily on old assumptions, old narratives, old claims. When he finally finished, Judge Whitaker looked toward Rebecca. "Miss Turner." Rebecca stood, opened the first binder, and began. She didn't start with emotion. She never did. Instead, she started with time. A timeline, large, detailed, precise, projected onto a screen. The display covered nearly a year, every major event, every significant communication, every documented interaction, every attempt Brock made to maintain contact. Rebecca walked slowly through the chronology, date by date, fact by fact. The method felt almost boring, which was exactly why it worked, because boring facts were difficult to challenge. Brock watched Judge Whitaker carefully. The judge took notes constantly, more notes than usual. That mattered. Then Rebecca introduced the first major category: employment records, pay stubs, schedules, attendance reports. The evidence established something simple. Brock had been working, not disappearing, not abandoning responsibilities. Working? Consistently. For years. The second category followed immediately. School involvement, volunteer logs, field trip participation, teacher communications, parent meetings. Again the same pattern emerged. Presence, consistency, participation, not the behavior of a parent withdrawing from his children. The third category hit harder. Video evidence. Rebecca played selected portions of the school parking lot recordings. Not dramatic clips, ordinary clips, morning after morning, week after week, month after month. The same truck, the same parking space, the same father, watching, waiting, never approaching, never creating conflict, never violating restrictions. The courtroom became unusually quiet because the videos revealed something powerful. Absence. The absence of misconduct. The absence of instability. The absence of every behavior repeatedly suggested by the opposing side. Judge Whitaker watched carefully, then asked for several clips to be replayed. That mattered too. Rebecca moved to the next section. School documentation. This was where the atmosphere shifted. Noah Simmons sat near the witness area, prepared, organized, professional. The district investigator testified regarding inconsistencies discovered during his review. Missing records, incomplete reports, communication gaps, procedural irregularities. The language remained careful, no exaggeration, no speculation, just facts. Each answer strengthened the same point. The administrative record surrounding Mason and Sophie was unusually incomplete. Olivia's attorney attempted to challenge him. Noah remained calm, precise, measured. Every answer returned to documentation. Every answer returned to evidence. Eventually, the attorney stopped pushing. Then Rebecca introduced the emails. The email from Mason, projected onto a screen. Simple, short, powerful. Dad, Mom says if we see you again, you'll probably leave a second time. I don't know what's true anymore. The courtroom remained silent. Judge Whitaker read it twice, then took more notes. Brock kept his eyes forward. The email still hurt, but today it served another purpose. Today it revealed confusion, and confusion didn't appear naturally. Someone created it. Then came the voicemail. Rebecca played the recording. Only once. That was enough. The sound of crying filled the room. Then the small voice. Dad. Silence followed. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The emotional weight required no explanation. Even Olivia's attorney avoided objecting. Some evidence explained itself. Then Rebecca reached the section she'd been saving. Text messages, private messages, messages nobody expected to become public. The screen displayed the conversation, the same one Brock had read weeks earlier. Rebecca highlighted a single sentence. I know he didn't actually leave them, but they don't need that confusion right now. The sentence hung over the courtroom. Heavy, permanent, unavoidable. For the first time all morning, Olivia looked visibly uncomfortable. Only briefly, but long enough. Judge Whitaker stared at the message, then looked down, then read it again. Rebecca allowed the silence to work, because silence often became more powerful than argument. Eventually she continued. No dramatic speech, no accusations, only facts, one layer after another, one piece after another, until the picture became increasingly difficult to dismiss. Then came Grant Holloway, not as a witness, as a topic. Rebecca introduced financial records. Nothing illegal, nothing scandalous, but revealing. Transfers, payments, shared expenses, timelines, connections. More importantly, she established his relationship with certain members of organizations connected to Briarwood. Again, not wrongdoing, just connections. Connections that raised questions. Questions Rebecca wanted the court asking. Grant shifted in his seat. For the first time all day, he looked uncomfortable. The image of complete confidence began cracking. Slowly, noticeably. Then Rebecca did something unexpected. She called Diane Keller, the vice principal, the woman who repeatedly denied Brock access to information. Diane approached the witness stand, visibly nervous. Rebecca's questioning remained polite, almost gentle. At first, then the inconsistencies appeared. Missing notes, missing reports, unrecorded communications, several decisions lacking complete documentation, nothing individually devastating. Together they became problematic, very problematic. The courtroom could feel it. Diane could feel it. Even Olivia's attorney appeared increasingly frustrated, because every answer seemed to create another question, and every question led back to the same issue: documentation, or the absence of it. Finally, after nearly 4 hours, Rebecca returned to counsel table, her presentation complete. The evidence remained visible everywhere, on screens, inside binders, across timelines, inside testimony. Judge Whittaker reviewed notes quietly. The courtroom waited. Nobody knew exactly what he was thinking. That was normal. Judges rarely revealed much. Several minutes passed. Then he looked toward Olivia, not her attorney, her, directly. The shift immediately captured everyone's attention. Even Brock sat straighter. Judge Whittaker removed his glasses, placed them on the bench, then asked a single question. Simple, direct, carefully chosen. The kind of question that couldn't easily be escaped. "Mrs. Barnes," Olivia looked up. "Yes, Your Honor." The judge's voice remained calm, measured, almost conversational. Yet everyone understood its importance, because after months of accusations, investigations, records, and testimony, the case had narrowed to something surprisingly simple. One central issue, one central claim, one central story. Judge Whittaker leaned forward slightly, then asked, "Did you tell those children that Mr. Barnes chose to leave them?" The courtroom became completely silent, and for the first time since this entire battle began, Brock felt the weight of the case shift. Not toward victory, not yet, toward truth. The question lingered in the courtroom long after Judge Whittaker finished speaking. "Did you tell those children that Mr. Barnes chose to leave them simple? Direct, impossible to misunderstand." For several seconds nobody moved, nobody spoke. The silence itself became evidence. Brock sat motionless beside Rebecca Turner. His hands rested calmly on the table. Only someone watching very closely would have noticed the slight tension in his jaw. Months earlier, he might have hoped for an immediate answer. A confession, a dramatic admission. Now he knew better. Truth rarely arrived in dramatic speeches. More often it arrived through hesitation. Olivia looked toward her attorney, then toward the judge, then back toward the witness stand. The delay mattered. Everyone in the room understood that. Finally, she answered, "I may have said something similar." The words landed awkwardly, not because of what they said, because of what they avoided. Judge Whittaker leaned forward slightly. "Something similar?" Olivia adjusted her posture. The children were confused. The judge waited. They had questions, still waiting. "I was trying to protect them." The explanation sounded familiar, too familiar. Brock had heard versions of it throughout the case. Protection, stability, best interests, all reasonable words, all capable of hiding unreasonable actions. Rebecca stood. "Your Honor, may I?" The judge nodded. Rebecca approached the witness stand, a folder already in her hand. She opened it slowly. No rush, no theatrics, just preparation. "Mrs. Barnes, do you recall sending this message?" The document appeared on a monitor. The same text message. The same sentence. I know he didn't actually leave them, but they don't need that confusion right now." The courtroom became quiet again. Olivia read the screen. For the first time all day, she appeared genuinely uncomfortable. Not frightened, not defeated, cornered, a subtle difference. Rebecca continued. "You sent this message, correct?" A pause. Then, "Yes." Another answer, another crack. Rebecca nodded. "And when you sent this message, you knew Mr. Barnes had not voluntarily abandoned his children." Olivia shifted slightly. "That's not what I meant." Rebecca didn't argue, didn't interrupt, didn't push. She simply repeated the question. "At that time, did you know he had not voluntarily abandoned his children?" Another pause. Longer. Then yes. The answer changed everything. Not legally, not immediately, but psychologically. The courtroom felt different afterward. The central claim driving the separation between Brock and his children had just suffered a direct hit, and everyone knew it. Rebecca returned to counsel table. Her job wasn't finished, not even close, but an important foundation had shifted. The rest would build on that. The hearing resumed. Additional testimony followed. Additional records. Additional clarification. Then Judge Whitaker turned his attention toward Briarwood Elementary, specifically Diane Keller. The vice principal returned to the witness stand. Her confidence looked noticeably weaker than earlier, not because she appeared dishonest, because she appeared unprepared for the level of scrutiny. The judge reviewed several documents, then asked questions, simple questions, administrative questions, record-keeping questions, policy questions, the kind administrators answer every day. Yet today the answers kept creating problems. Documentation that should have existed did not. Reports that should have been completed were incomplete. Communications that should have been preserved were missing. Again and again, the same pattern appeared. Not malicious, perhaps, but careless, and carelessness mattered when children were involved. Eventually, Diane admitted something she had resisted throughout the proceedings. The admission arrived quietly, almost reluctantly. "We should have documented more thoroughly." The sentence sounded harmless. It wasn't. Rebecca immediately wrote it down. Judge Whitaker wrote it down. Even Olivia's attorney wrote it down, because admissions carried weight, especially when they confirmed existing concerns. The afternoon continued. Then came the part Brock dreaded most, the Guardian ad litem report. Months earlier, the court appointed an independent representative to evaluate the children's interests. That representative had spent time with Mason, time with Sophie, time reviewing evidence, time reviewing records. Unlike everyone else, the Guardian wasn't focused on winning. The assignment was simpler. Determine what served the children. The report remained confidential. Large portions were not discussed publicly, but several conclusions entered the record. One stood out immediately. Both children demonstrated confusion regarding the circumstances surrounding their father's absence. Confusion, the same word appearing again. Not fear, not hatred, not rejection. Confusion. The distinction mattered enormously. Another conclusion followed. The children believed conflicting versions of events. Conflicting versions. Again, questions, doubt, uncertainty. The narrative wasn't holding together, not inside the courtroom, and apparently not inside the children's minds either. By late afternoon, Judge Whitaker announced a short recess. People filed into hallways. Attorneys reviewed notes. Court staff reorganized documents. Brock stepped outside the courtroom, not because he needed fresh air, because he needed space. The hallway stretched long and quiet before him. Sunlight filtered through tall courthouse windows. People moved past. None mattered. Only two people mattered. Mason, Sophie. For months he had fought through paperwork, procedure, evidence. Now those children sat somewhere nearby, speaking with professionals, answering questions, trying to explain experiences they should never have needed to explain. Brock wished he could protect them from that. He couldn't, so he waited. Waiting had become another skill, another discipline, another requirement. Minutes passed, then more. Nearly an hour. The guardian ad litem remained inside. The children remained inside. The conversations continued. Brock never learned exactly what was said. Not then, not immediately. Certain interviews remained protected. For good reason. Children deserved privacy, even during custody battles, especially during custody battles. Still, the uncertainty felt unbearable. Every passing minute seemed longer than the last. Rebecca eventually joined him. Neither spoke much. There wasn't much to say. The evidence had already spoken. Now everyone waited to see whether the children would be heard. The courthouse clock ticked forward. 1 minute, then another, then another. Finally, the interview room door opened. People emerged. First the guardian ad litem, then a court staff member, then others. No children. The children had already exited through another route. Standard procedure. Still, Brock's eyes searched automatically. Habit, hope, both. Rebecca noticed. She didn't comment. Several more minutes passed. Then she received a message. Read it. Looked up. Read it again. Something changed in her expression. Not excitement. Not relief. Something deeper. Brock noticed immediately. "What is it?" Rebecca didn't answer right away. Instead, she placed the phone into her pocket, then looked directly at him. For a brief moment, months of legal strategy disappeared. Months of professional distance disappeared. Only the human reality remained. "They asked about you." Brock frowned. "What do you mean?" Rebecca took a slow breath, then delivered the sentence that stopped everything. "Both children asked if you still sit outside the school every morning." The hallway became silent. Not literally. People still moved, doors still opened, phones still rang. Yet Brock heard none of it. Only that sentence. Both children asked if you still sit outside the school every morning. For nearly a year he had shown up. Same truck, same parking spot, same routine. Not because anyone noticed, not because anyone rewarded him, because he couldn't stop being their father. And somehow, despite everything the children knew, maybe they always had, maybe they suspected, maybe they had seen him more often than he realized, the reason didn't matter. The fact mattered. They knew. Brock looked toward the courthouse window. Sunlight reflected off distant buildings. His throat tightened unexpectedly. The feeling surprised him. Not sadness. Not anger. Something closer to hope. Dangerous hope. The kind he had spent months trying not to trust. Rebecca stood beside him quietly, allowing the moment to settle, allowing it to become real. Because after months of rumors, accusations, and lies, one truth had finally crossed the distance between father and children. They knew he was still there, and for the first time Brock realized they might soon learn why. The order arrived on a Friday afternoon. At 3:17 p.m., Rebecca Turner called before Brock even opened the email. "We got it." Brock sat up immediately. For a moment neither spoke. Months of hearings, months of documentation, months of waiting. Everything seemed to pause. Then Rebecca continued. "The judge modified the temporary custody arrangement." Brock closed his eyes. Not from relief, from caution. Hope had become something he handled carefully. "What does that mean?" "It means supervised visitation begins immediately." Brock looked toward the dining room where boxes of evidence still occupied half the wall. "So I get to see them?" "Yes." The answer arrived quietly, simply. No celebration, no dramatic speech, just a fact. For the first time in nearly a year, Brock Barnes would see his children again. The visitation center meeting occurred 3 days later. A neutral location, bright walls, security cameras, family counselors, procedures, everything designed to protect children. Everything designed to avoid conflict. Brock arrived 40 minutes early. Naturally, he sat in the parking lot holding a small paper bag. Inside sat 2 items, a horse figurine for Sophie, the same birthday gift the school refused months earlier, and a baseball keychain for Mason. Simple, nothing extravagant, nothing designed to buy affection, just reminders. The counselor eventually approached. "You can come inside now." Brock nodded. His heartbeat remained steady. Surprisingly steady. The fear wasn't about seeing them. The fear was about what they might feel when they saw him. The meeting room looked ordinary. Books, board games, comfortable chairs, a small table, sunlight through large windows. Then the door opened, and everything else disappeared. Mason entered first, 12 years old, taller than before, older than before, different. Sophie followed, holding the strap of her backpack tightly. Neither child moved. Neither child spoke. For several seconds the room stood completely still. Brock remained seated, exactly as counselors instructed. No rushing forward, no overwhelming emotion, no pressure. Just presence. The same thing he had offered from across the street every morning. Presence. Sophie's eyes filled first. Not tears, recognition, the kind that appears when reality collides with a story. Mason looked uncertain, studying Brock carefully, comparing memory to reality, comparing truth to everything he had been told. The counselor remained near the door, observing, waiting. Then Sophie spoke. A single word. "Dad?" Brock nodded. "Hi, sweetheart." His voice remained calm, steady, controlled. Months of preparation held. Sophie's eyes immediately filled with tears. She took one step forward, then stopped. Another step, then stopped again, as if she wasn't sure she was allowed. Brock didn't move. He understood. She needed to decide, not him. Finally, Sophie crossed the room and wrapped her arms around him. The hug lasted only seconds, yet it erased months of distance, months of silence, months of uncertainty. Brock closed his eyes briefly. Nothing more, no speech, no dramatic declaration, just gratitude. When Sophie stepped back, Mason remained where he was, watching, thinking, evaluating. The counselor encouraged conversation, simple questions, school, friends, activities, normal topics, the kind families discussed every day. Brock followed the guidance carefully. No criticism of Olivia, no discussion of court, no discussion of accusations, only the children, only their lives. An hour passed quickly. Then another visit followed the next week, and another. Each meeting became easier. The tension slowly disappeared. Not all at once, gradually, the way trust usually returns. Meanwhile, outside the visitation room, other things continued changing. Judge Whitaker reviewed additional evidence. Noah Simmons completed his district investigation. Rebecca continued filing motions. The case kept moving, and the evidence kept growing. Several weeks later, another order arrived. Expanded visitation, more time, fewer restrictions, progress, measured, documented, real. By late summer, Brock was allowed supervised outings, parks, restaurants, public places, simple experiences. One Saturday afternoon, they visited Gray's Lake Park. The 3 of them walked along the water, feeding ducks, talking about school, talking about baseball, talking about everything except court, everything except lawyers, everything except pain. Because children deserved more than legal battles, They deserved childhood. Brock never forgot that. The turning point arrived on a Monday morning in September, the first day the revised arrangement allowed Brock to participate in school drop-off, not from across the street, not from a parking lot, directly, legally, openly. The morning felt strange. For almost a year he had watched Briarwood Elementary from a distance. Now he was driving toward it, with permission, with rights restored, with his children beside him. Mason sat in the passenger seat. Sophie sat in back. The silence inside the truck felt comfortable, natural, a forgotten feeling returning. As they approached the school, Brock noticed the familiar parking spot across the street, the spot where he spent countless mornings, the spot where everything changed, the spot where hope survived. He glanced at it briefly, then continued driving. No reason to stop there anymore, not today. The drop-off lane moved slowly. Teachers greeted students. Parents waved goodbye. Normal life, ordinary life, the life Brock spent months trying to reclaim. When the truck finally stopped, nobody moved immediately. The moment felt larger than any of them expected. Sophie broke the silence first. "I missed this truck." Brock smiled. "So did I." Mason looked out the windshield, watching students entering the building, thinking. The boy had become quieter during the past year, more cautious, more thoughtful. Then he finally turned toward Brock. A serious expression crossed his face, one that reminded Brock of himself. "Dad? Yeah?" The question arrived softly, without anger, without accusation, just honesty. "Were you really there every morning?" The words settled inside the cab. Brock knew this moment would eventually come. He simply hadn't known when. Now it was here. The question that mattered more than court orders, more than hearings, more than evidence. The question only a child could ask. "Were you really there every morning?" Brock looked at his son, then nodded once. "Every morning I could be." Mason didn't respond immediately. He studied his father, searching for something, then slowly looked across the street, toward the parking space, the old parking space, the one he now understood, the one he had probably noticed far more often than anyone realized. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Mason opened the truck door, stepped outside, and for the first time in nearly a year, walked into Briarwood Elementary, knowing his father hadn't chosen to leave. The truth hadn't solved everything. Not yet. But it had finally reached the people who mattered most, and that changed everything. The final hearing lasted less than 2 hours. After everything that had happened that almost felt unfair. Months of preparation, months of uncertainty, months of evidence. And now it all came down to a single morning inside a courtroom. Brock Barnes sat beside Rebecca Turner one final time. The same courtroom, the same judge, the same case number. Yet everything felt different. Not because the legal battle was over, because the truth no longer stood alone. The truth now had witnesses, documents, records, video, and most importantly, 2 children beginning to understand what had really happened. Judge Harold Whitaker entered. Everyone stood, then sat. The proceedings moved efficiently. Much of the groundwork had already been completed during previous hearings. The court had reviewed evidence. The court had reviewed reports. The court had reviewed recommendations. Now the focus shifted toward resolution. Practical decisions, future arrangements, long-term stability. The judge spoke carefully, as he always did. He summarized months of findings. The language remained professional, measured, neutral, yet the conclusions were clear. The evidence did not support the claim that Brock voluntarily abandoned his children. The evidence demonstrated